All right, let's dive in. Today, we're putting the U.S. juvenile court system itself on trial. We're going to look at where it came from, how it works, and get to the bottom of the fundamental question that's been nagging it for over a century. Is this system here to help kids or to punish them? Just listen to this. This was the actual chilling reason a teenager gave after being found guilty in the brutal killing of a homeless man. The crime was completely senseless, and the explanation, even more so. You know, it's cases like this that really force us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. And that really is the heart of the matter, isn't it? When a kid does something truly terrible, what are we trying to achieve? Is it about punishment or is it about rehabilitation? That tension, that tug of war between those two ideas, well, it defines the entire juvenile court system. So to really get a grip on this, we've got to go back to the very beginning. See, the juvenile court wasn't created to be just a mini version of adult court. Nope. It was founded on a totally different and pretty radical idea. And that idea is wrapped up in this Latin term, parens patriae. It literally means parent of the country. Think of it like this. If your kid messes up at home, a good parent doesn't just throw the book at them. You try to figure out why they did it and teach them a better way, right? Well, that was the original mission of the juvenile court, for the state to act like a surrogate parent, focusing on fixing the problem, not just on punishment.
Okay, so that's the big idea. But what does it actually look like when a young person enters the system? Well, their journey starts at this really critical crossroads, way before a judge ever even sees the case.
First up is intake. This is basically a screening to decide if the case should even go to court. After that, there's a detention hearing to decide if the youth can go home or has to stay in custody, and that's a huge decision. Then comes this crucial off-ramp called diversion, which can steer a kid toward a treatment program instead of a courtroom. It's only if a case gets through all those filters that a formal petition is filed and things get serious.
And you really can't overstate how important these early stages are. I mean, look at the data. Almost half of all juvenile cases are dealt with before they ever get in front of a judge. This just shows you the incredible power these early decisions have in shaping a young person's entire future.
But this stage is also where we see a really troubling pattern emerge. The data shows a pretty stark racial disparity. As you can see here, African American youth are detained at a much higher rate than white youth. This raises some serious questions about fairness and bias right at the very front door of the system.
Okay, next we get to what is probably the most profound, most life-altering decision in the entire juvenile system. It's what some call the point of no return. This is when the court decides to waive its jurisdiction, to basically give up on a child and send them into the adult criminal justice system.
This is the ultimate test of that whole parens patriae philosophy. It forces us to ask, at what point does a child stop being a child in the eyes of the law? The consequences of this decision are just massive, because the adult system, well, it plays by a completely different set of rules. It's like we're talking about two different universes. The juvenile court is aiming for rehabilitation. The adult court is all about punishment. One is focused on what's best for the kid, the other is focused on public safety. The sentences are flexible on one side and rigid and punitive on the other. Sending a kid across this line isn't just a change of courtroom, it's a complete 180 on the whole philosophy.
So the big argument for transferring kids to adult court is that it's supposed to be a deterrent, right? Get tough, crack down, and make society safer. But when researchers actually dug into the data to see if that was true, they found something, well, something that goes against all common sense.
The results are just startling. This policy, this thing that was supposed to make us safer, seems to do the exact opposite. Study after study shows that kids transferred to the adult system are rearrested for more violent crimes at higher rates. I mean, look at Pennsylvania, an incredible 77% higher. It's a policy that seems to completely backfire. So what about the kids who stay in the juvenile system? For them, the next stop is the trial itself. And over the past 60 years or so, the Supreme Court has completely changed what a juvenile trial looks like, giving kids many of the same legal protections that adults have. This entire revolution was built around one core legal idea: due process. You see, the original thinking was something like, hey, if the court is trying to help these kids, why do they need a bunch of rights? But starting in the 1960s, the Supreme Court began to say, whoa, hold on. Even a system with the best intentions has to be fair.
The real game changer was a 1967 case called In Re Galt. That's the one that gave kids fundamental rights, like the right to have a lawyer. And since then, the Supreme Court has kept building on that, ruling out the death penalty for juveniles and banning mandatory life without parole sentences. They've essentially built this constitutional wall of protection around kids in the justice system.
But for all these new protections, there is one huge, crucial right that's still missing. In most states, kids do not have a constitutional right to a trial by jury. Think about that. Unlike an adult, there's no group of your peers standing between you and the power of the state. In most cases, a child's fate is decided by just one person, the judge. And that brings us to the end of the line, the verdict, and what comes next. In the juvenile system, they don't call it sentencing. They call it disposition. Even the word itself is supposed to reflect that original goal of disposing of the case in a way that's best for the child.
So what actually happens to kids who are found delinquent? Well, the numbers might not be what you expect. Despite all the headlines about serious crime, the vast majority, 64%, get sentenced to formal probation. Only about a quarter are actually placed in a residential facility. Probation is by far the true workhorse of the juvenile justice system.
And yet, for all its talk about helping kids, many critics argue the juvenile court has really lost its way. This legal scholar, Barry Feld, he just nails the central conflict. He basically says that the system still uses the language of rehabilitation, but when you look at what it actually does, it looks a whole lot like the adult criminal court it was created to be different from.
Which brings us right back to where we started. The whole system was founded on this noble idea of the state acting like a parent. But after more than a century, has that mission been lost? Has the court that was designed to save children slowly turned into just a junior version of the one designed to punish adults? That right there is the question at the heart of the juvenile court's trial today.